Yeah. What are my favorite films that represent sort of science and Hollywood? And there's certainly a lot of films one can choose, or that I can choose to call my favorites. I mean, 2001: A Space Odyssey is sort of the gold standard for science and cinema. But more recent films like Interstellar, I mean, Deep Impact from 1997 is a good one. Probably my most favorite recent science film in Hollywood is the movie Arrival with Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner. And I just love it because, it's got a lot of science in it, but it's really also a character study. And it really is taking into consideration, you know, how these characters are developed along with their science. So there's the issue of scientists who are involved in making Hollywood films. And that's certainly something that's becoming more and more common. Although, you got it back a long time ago as well. I mean, I find that scientists working on Hollywood films goes back to the 1910s. But more recently, you find a lot of films where the filmmakers are very serious about making sure that the science is as authentic as possible. So I always say it's a post-Jurassic Park phenomenon. So starting with Jurassic Park in 1993, Steven Spielberg wanted it to be as scientifically authentic as possible. So he brought in paleontologist Jack Horner, along with other paleontologists, to make sure the dinosaurs were as correct as possible. But you see that in a lot of recent films as well, films like Gravity or The Martian, that had a lot of scientists from NASA involved in the making of it. And the scientists themselves, they always want to make sure they can put as much accurate science as possible into these films. Real science in movies is important for science communication in a number of different ways. I mean, movies most often are the ways in which the public actually can interface with science, right? It's where they see representations of scientists, they see representations of science in practice, and they see representations of the impact of science on society. So having the science in these movies be as authentic as possible is important in that way. It's also the case that there are ways in which movies can actually impact science and technology. So, for example, I talk about something that I call the war games effect, where movies can play a role in calling attention to a scientific issue that scientists think needs more political or economic or scientific attention paid to it. So movies like Deep Impact and Armageddon called attention to the dangers of near-Earth objects, or The Day After Tomorrow, which called attention to issues related to climate change, or, as we can see and are living, films like Contagion and Outbreak, calling attention to the dangers of emerging viruses. So movies can impact science communication in terms of depicting how people perceive of science, and then it can impact it in terms of how it impacts science itself. So in terms of science teaching, movies can help in a number of different ways. I mean, one way is that they can be used to explore particular types of phenomena that teachers want to get across to their students. So you could take examples of black holes from the movie Interstellar and use that movie to teach students about the nature of black holes or astronomical phenomena. But it's also the case that you can use movies that have errors in them as well. That's a common technique that teachers use when they use science in movies, is they will show a movie and ask their students what's wrong with the science in that particular movie as a way to get the students to apply their knowledge in a new situation. Also, it's useful to have movies in the classroom in terms of that relationship between science and society, where you can get the students thinking about ethical or moral issues related to science by using a movie and putting them in that situation. Yeah, so in terms of my own background as a molecular evolutionary geneticist and thinking about which films I find myself most comfortable with in terms of the way they're using the science. I would definitely point to the 1997 film Gattaca in terms of the ways in which it depicts a world where genetic engineering has happened and people are using genetic engineering as a way to get ahead in life for their children. And that film, in many ways, even at the time, had a very good grasp on how genetic engineering might happen with humans, but also what the implications of a world in which people buy into the idea of genetic determinism, the idea that genes make us who we are and nothing else matters. And so the movie did a great job of exploring those types of ethical issues. And now, over 20 years later, we can look back and see that the science that was used is actually very prescient as well. So in addition to fiction films, right, documentaries can also serve a significant role in science communication. I mean, one of the things that we have to deal with when we talk about documentaries is, we understand that they are also media creation. So, they're not totally objective, but by dealing with the real world and real subjects, it can also give us better insight into the workings of science, into scientists' lives through science biographies. So the documentary can also be incredibly useful in communicating with the public, but it can also tell a story that people will find more believable, right? And get into more insights about science than you can do with a fictional film, especially a fictional Hollywood film, where you have to worry, about having an action-filled plot as well. So you can do more exploration in a science documentary in terms of the science than you ever could with the fictional film.
Se você gostou desse vídeo, dê um like, compartilhe. Aproveite para assinar o canal e ative as notificações.